I call to order the Board of Selectmen at 6:30. If everyone will rise to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is anybody recording this evening? Not seeing anybody. I'd like to have our first candidate come up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is Mr. Mark Rees, longtime manager here in Massachusetts and recently in Maine. He's got about 35 years of experience, I believe, and he's one of the selections of the screening committee to bring before you tonight. So,
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
As you know, Winchendon is a small community. We're looking for a new manager. I'm sure you read about a lot of the stuff that's gone on here.
Yes.
One of the things we're looking for right now in a new manager is, as we know, the town was very divided earlier this year. We're hoping to bring closure to that with the appointment of a new manager. We look forward to the turnaround that we are currently underway with and hope that continues.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. My name is Mark Rees. As Bernie mentioned, I've been long-term local government manager. It's a profession that I've enjoyed immensely. It's brought me a lot of personal fulfillment as well as professional accomplishment. You all have my resume in front of you, so you, without going into detail with it, you can see that it's been a record of steady growth and progression in professional management of communities. I started off with a Master's in Public Administration from the University of Pittsburgh with a concentration on urban governance. From there, I went to my first professional job, which was a purchasing agent for a county in North Carolina. I was there for about 4 or 5 years. I met my wife there and started our family there. With the desire to grow professionally, I went back to the Pennsylvania area where I was an assistant township manager for O'Hara Township. It was there that I got into the nuts and bolts of financial management, not only budgeting, but also at time doing the debits and credits and things of that nature. Moving forward in professional development, and wanting to move back to New England, I became the first town administrator in Ashburnham, Winchendon. During that time, Ashburnham was going through some difficult times in terms of bringing in professional management. They were the old style form of government with a lot of elected officials, a lot of silo making by departments, so they brought in me as their first professional manager, and I was able to turn that community around, bring in more modern management practices. I was able to combine into Department of Public Works. I was able to bring into first, believe it or not, computer system. It was a number of years ago, but even then they were behind the 8 ball in that area. I was able to strengthen their financial procedures, their bottom line, and when I left, the town was in much better shape than when I came there. Similarly, when I went to Northbridge, which was my next job, that was also a town that was undergoing significant financial stress and mismanagement. They were having revenue deficits. Their surpluses were dwindling, a great deal of infighting among officials. I was able to come in there and turn that community around as well by, again, strengthening their financial procedures, being more realistic in their budgeting, but also bringing together more team-oriented community in terms of department heads, the various elected and appointed boards, and really getting them to focus on a joint set of goals. Again, that community was left far better off when I left than when I came there. I then took a little bit of a detour and became the CFO for the town of Framingham, a town of about 60,000. But surprisingly enough, a community that also was under some financial strain with deficit reserves, revenue deficits, lack of long-term financial planning. They didn't even have a capital budget process, which I thought was surprising. So I put that all in place. They had trouble reconciling their cash. And I put together a team that worked on that and also put together procedures to make sure that didn't occur again in the future. From being the CFO in Framingham, I moved back into the CEO position and worked in North Andover for 11 years. I was their longest-serving town manager there. When I got there, the financial management wasn't a real issue, but there was a great deal of divisiveness in the community, a lot of strain between the finance committee, the board of selectmen, and the school committee, and I was able to, over time, build a positive relationship between those groups. And ultimately, when we went into town meeting, last 3 or 4 years I was there, we had a unified budget that was presented by the finance committee, the board of selectmen, and the school committee. When I went to North Andover, that was the furthest from the case, and I was able to, again, build that team-oriented approach. Then wanting to fulfill a lifelong career dream of mine, to be a city manager in a larger community, I went up to Portland, Maine, and I was there for the last 3 years. I guess that old adage is be careful of what you dream of. Once I reached that higher level of local government management, some of the negative things outweighed some of the positive things. And it determined that it was best that perhaps I leave that position and then start looking for another position, which I've been doing. And what attracts me to Winchendon is what's attracted me to most of the jobs that I've had, and that's the opportunity to help communities turn themselves around. I have a clear track record of being able to help communities who are experiencing financial difficulties and management problems like Winchendon and turn it into a far more positive, far more strong position than it was previously. I know Bernie has already started you down the path of becoming a much more financially strong community. I'd like to continue that. I'd also like to bring about a commitment to stronger management as well, and working with the departments and the elected bodies and the appointed officials towards, again, making sure that Winchendon can reach its highest potential that it can.
How would you go about bringing this community back together?
Well, I think one of the key things is to work with the selectmen on setting community goals that you'd like to meet. One of the things I've tried to do in every community I worked with, some more success than failure, but not always success, is working through the selectmen through a series of community meetings, set overall goals that you'd like to achieve, both in short term as well as the long term, and then using those goals to work with the departments to come up with objectives that will move you towards achieving those more general goals. And I see it as more of a community setting goal, as not just the Board of Selectmen, because I think you want to encourage people to come and comment about the future of the community and what they see as positive things are and what the challenges are, and then based on that feedback, dilute or bring it into a more consistent set of goals, an action plan that can then move that forward.
How do you think we can rebuild the trust of the community?
It's not going to be easy. It takes time, and it takes a lot of perseverance. Once you lose that trust, it's hard to regain it. And I think the only way you can do it is by putting the best work possible that you can put out there, work that is at the highest level of things being done in terms of proper high-level management issues, as well as a strong budget. You need to build the confidence back that you know what you're doing. And I think that's something I've been able to do in most of the communities I worked at, is through professionalism and hard work and effective communication, provide the evidence that people need, that you know what you're doing and that you're successful at what you're doing, so that you can slowly build back that confidence. But it's not, you just can't stand up and say, we got a new sheriff in town, everything's going to be okay. You need to be able to go out there and prove that everything's going to be okay, and that's going to take time, and it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take direct evidence that things are moving in the right direction.
Can you give me an idea of what your entry plan might be?
In terms of the immediate short term, what I would like to do is, meet one-on-one with the selectmen for half a day or a day, where you go out and show me the community from your perspective, give me the opportunity to talk about what you see are the challenges and the possibilities in the community, and just kind of build that one-on-one relationship that I think is very important between the town manager and the Board of Selectmen. Similarly, I'd like the department heads to take me out and show me their operations from the field perspective and what their needs are, how I can help them be successful. That's what I want to learn from them. And then also community outreach would be the third component of it. And I would go out and I'd ask to be able to go before the different civic organizations and the Chamber of Commerce and things, school boards, school committees, just introduce myself and again, give me an opportunity to get feedback from them as to where they think the community is going. And I think that would also help, again, if the selectmen want to move in that direction in helping you formulate community goals, which I think, again, is very important for proper management of the community.
Thank you.
Hi. How would you describe your management style, and could you give me some specific examples?
Sure. I think my management style is one to have the people who work for me be in position to succeed, and I see that as making sure that the resources are there for them to move forward with their departments, but I also hold them very much accountable for their actions. So again, along the theme of community goals, that would be distilled into objectives that the departments would work for towards achieving those goals. Those objectives would be specific and measurable. I want to make sure that the resources are there for them to achieve those objectives, but then I also want to hold them accountable. So in terms of if how well they did make their objectives, or perhaps if they failed, why they failed, and to make sure that they're aware of my perspective on the work that they're doing. I am not a micromanager by any perspective. I think we hire professionals to do their job. I would be the last person to tell the police chief how to be the police chief, or the fire chief how to do the fire chief. But I think it's my responsibility to help them move their departments forward, and again, to hold them accountable for specific objectives that come from the Board of Selectmen through me towards making the specific departments move forward in a progressive fashion.
Okay, thank you. How would you hold them accountable?
I'm sorry?
How would you hold them accountable?
I'm sorry?
How would you hold them accountable? When you say you'll hold them accountable, what ways would you do that?
Hold them, okay, well, annual evaluations in which I put in place, for example, in North Andover, an evaluation tool that consisted of 50% of it, the specific measurement towards objectives that we agreed upon, and then the other part, the more subjective aspects of management, how well did they communicate, how well did they delegate, how responsive were they to requests for information, things of that nature. So there was an annual evaluation, and based on that evaluation, there was merit raises provided to the department heads, again, a large part depending upon how well they succeeded with their objectives. But an annual objective system only works well if it's no surprise when you go in for that annual evaluation. So you want to have constant feedback with your department heads so that they know on a daily basis how well they're doing or not how well they're doing. So it's got to be a flow of communication culminating in the more formal written evaluation. I've also put in place quarterly evaluations, again, feeding up into the annual evaluation.
Thank you.
Okay, it's my turn.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Just kind of on that note, we hear a lot about, open door policies, closed door policies, et cetera. You're up in your office. How do you, if citizen comes in and wants to speak with you or whatever, do you have an open door policy? I guess
Yeah,
bottom
it's,
line.
Obviously, if there's meetings going on or
Right.
work being done, but
Yeah.
no, my approach is if people want to meet with me, by all means, I prefer that they make appointments so that I can be prepared for the meetings.
Sure.
Similarly with employees, I have an open door policy with them as well. They can come meet with me, obviously, subject to my work constraints, email, things of that nature. But no, I try to be as open as possible to not only community but also to the citizen or to the employees as well.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Any more?
No.
Okay. I have some financial management questions
Mm-hmm.
for you. I'm just wondering, could you tell us what your, we're trying to get out of, I'm sure you're familiar, this town has got a financial crisis that we're slowly climbing out of. So tell me, what is your approach to financial management?
I think you have to be conservative and realistic in terms of how you go about putting your budgets together. I think the two things I always try to do is underestimate your revenues and overestimate your expenditures. Oftentimes we'll get into trouble with that area. I think it's also very important that you have regular, accurate financial reports so that you can at any time be able to gauge where you are in terms of where your projections are to your actual performance. I think that's critical to avoiding problems down in the future. I think it's also important that you have long-term financial planning in place so that not only are you dealing, so it's not always dealing in crisis management, but that you're looking forward in the future to see where potential problems are going to be. Along that corollary to financial planning is capital budgeting. And I've been very successful in all the communities I've worked in putting in effective 5-year capital plans that have been able to address serious infrastructure problems. Again, I go back to my days in North Andover, and if you were to drive through that community now, you'd see a number of signs up that say North Andover facility plan, and they'd be next to a building that's under construction. So they put in a new fire station. We renovated the town hall. We were able to build a school administration building, numerous other capital projects, all without requiring a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. And again, this was because we had strong financial capital planning that prioritized capital projects and structured the debt service so that there would be a future capability of borrowing money to fund these type of projects. So even though I've only been gone from North Andover for 3 or 4 years, the work that started under my administration is now bearing fruit in terms of them being able to accomplish their capital needs.
Okay. What about, as far as with the capital improvements, do you have any experience with any grants or anything? Are you at all interested in that, or?
Yes, I've always gone after grants, be they state or federal, in order to provide some infrastructure funding. For example, in North Andover, we did a major overhaul of the town commons area with new streets and new roads and things, new sidewalks, underground utilities, things of that nature. And most of that was paid for through federal or state grants. Similarly, when I was in Portland, we used an economic development grant to develop a small industrial park up there as well to provide infrastructure. So I'm well familiar with it. The other thing I found out in Portland, though, which is the ability of nonprofit organizations to provide financial assistance to communities, especially communities that have significant poverty issues. We utilize a number of major international nonprofit foundation organizations to provide funding for a lot of the programs that we were dealing with that dealt with poverty and things of that nature. So that's something that I think could certainly be pursued.
Okay. The other question I have is for, we're partly, we have partial oversight by the Department of Revenue to help us through this crisis. And do you have experience dealing with, a taxing, municipal taxing state, or, and how do you feel about having to work with the Department of Revenue?
I've worked with the Department of Revenue for a number of years. When I was around all the years that I was worked with in Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if he's still there, but Rick Kingsley, who was the chairman of the director of the Bureau of Local Services, was an old hockey buddy of mine. We grew up in the same town in Connecticut. So I would call Rick on a regular basis. So I've always felt that in dealing with regulators, both on the federal and the state level, environmental, financial, regardless, you want to build a positive relationship with them because they can make their life a lot more difficult to you than you can to them. So, and if you access them and do it in the right way, you benefit from it because they don't mind sharing their expertise and their ability to help you. And clearly that's the case in Winchendon, where they've come out and I think done a very good job. I read their report and clearly gave you clear direction as to how you can get yourself out of this morass, and I think that's a very positive thing.
Okay. And then, have you had much experience with what's your experience with the collective bargaining and the unions, and how do you feel about that?
Well, during my career, I've done everything from being the person who sits at the table, who does the research in terms of that gives it to the negotiator in terms of comparabilities and things of that nature, or what other communities are paying their employees, and all the way from the across the table negotiations with the union leadership to the being the one who tells the negotiators how I want to approach it. So I've done the whole gamut of it. And I think the success that I've had in collective bargaining, which I think is evident in that not one of my agreements has ever gone up to for an arbitration award. We've always been able to settle before that, and also any disciplinary grievances that I've held have always been upheld under appeal. So, but I think the success, to make it clear, is that you have to have mutual respect across the table. That, in a sense, the union leadership is there by law and as well as representatives of their employees, and you have to build that trust that when you're telling them something that it's that they can believe you and that it's based in fact. One of the things that we were able to do in North Andover was I was able to negotiate modest collective bargaining agreements, even though the union was asking much greater than that, by sitting down with them and explaining the financial situation of the community and the fact that if you looked at the actual numbers as opposed to somebody's rumors, that we just didn't have the money to be able to pay those type of contracts that you're looking for. So it's more of a fact-based approach as opposed to the emotional approach towards negotiating. And by developing that mutual respect that's so critical and focusing on facts and not emotions, I've been very successful in collective bargaining.
Oh, good, okay. And then what about technology? We've had some issues with software here, some pretty major issues. What's your stand like on technology? Are you experienced with it? Are you pro-technology?
Well, in this day and age, I think whether you're pro or negative, it's there. I mean, you got to, if you want to have a good operation, you need to have good technology. And again, early on in my career, I recognized that in Ashburnham when I put in their first town-wide computer system, all the way up to Portland, where I had an IT department of 20 people. Am I a technology geek? No. But do I know enough about it to be able to make sure that when the salesmen come in and tell me what the system can do, that I can determine whether they're pulling the wool over my eyes or giving me factual information? Yes, I can do that. Can I know when department heads are blaming each other as to whose fault it is that this isn't working? Oh, it's because I'm knowledgeable enough to be able to figure out what the problem is and then assign responsibility to fix it. So I know that you have a Munis system here.
Yes.
I'm familiar with Munis. I was encouraged when I saw, and again, the DOR report that they're willing to help you in terms of better usage of their software. I mean, they are the big game in municipal software in New England, and they certainly put out a good product. And if you can get them to help you, and especially making sure that all the things work together and work well is critical. The current practice or the past practice of having these manual walkthroughs and connections and stuff like that, there's no need for that. I mean, the software is there to prevent that from happening.
Absolutely. Okay.
With small communities like ourselves, we often talk about, and there's a lot of talk coming about regionalization of certain things. What's your thoughts on that type of?
Well, I guess I go back really early in my career when I worked in North Carolina, and they had a strong county form of government, and the benefits of that regional approach was very profound. We had one emergency dispatch center for the entire county of 80,000 people. We had one emergency management function for the entire county. There wasn't each municipality, so I saw all the benefits of it. But I'm also a pragmatist, so when we come to New England, obviously that approach to regionalization isn't going to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't make incremental positive changes towards regionalization. That's a small example of that. was in North Andover. We partnered with Andover for the sharing of DPW equipment. We had a large sewer router equipment that we would lend back and forth. They had another piece of equipment that they lent to us. So that's one small example of it. Also, I was a part of the Merrimack Mayors and Managers Coalition, in which area communities got together and we looked at areas of mutual interest and also tried to put together a united front with lobbying the State House in Boston. Another example, in Portland, we had a combined dispatch center between Portland and 2 other communities. So I'm well aware of it. I'm also very much aware of how difficult it is to implement it in New England. But having said that, I have had some success in that, and I think it's also building those relationships with area communities so that, again, people aren't going to work well together if they don't trust each other. So I think, first of all, Winchendon needs to continue down its path of getting its house in order before I think you can start building bridges with other communities.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
You may.
Mr. Rees, you had mentioned earlier long-term financial planning and long-term capital planning and budgeting. Forecasting is something that we, in my term, well, I've been in town, we've never really done.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at a budget kind of on a, okay, this is, and I think it would be very helpful to have that, that look ahead. How far ahead do you normally look when you do your budget and your long-term financial planning?
Usually about 5 years.
5 years.
I know some communities like to go longer, to 5 to 10 years, but I think anything past 5 years, it's more and more speculation than based on the reliance on historical trends. I think the other thing you need to be aware of is, especially in Massachusetts, because there's so many different areas of revenues, everything from motor vehicle excise to state aid, and a great deal of fluctuation, that you have to look at each revenue source individually and try to take forecasts from there. So that's not just looking at bottom lines, but you're looking at the variations of each revenue source. Similarly with expenditures, there's obviously the joker cards of snow and ice and veterans benefits and things of that nature. So you need to be conservative, but I think it's very helpful in terms of looking for a picture of what may go wrong, what may go right in the future. And it's certainly a critical part of the capital planning process, because when you're borrowing money for 15, 20 years, you want to know what impact that debt is going to have on your future years as well, so that you're not making short-sighted decisions in how much you're going to borrow that's going to come and affect you negatively in the future.
And if I also one more, please.
Yep.
When you make your budget, your presentation to the board for the next year's budget and such like that, what form do you do it? How do you do it?
I usually use a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
In which I highlight major areas of the budget. But I think before you get to that budget presentation part, which is in a sense the mid area, because then it's going to go to the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, ultimately town meeting, you need to lay your groundwork in advance. And one of the things that I'd like to see a community do is, before the budget process even starts, that there's be a meeting with the elected officials to determine what direction they want the community to go in, so that when I'm developing a budget, it's not just my budget, but it attempts to reflect the desires and the needs of the elected officials.
Thank you. That's okay. Economic development. The tax burden in Winchendon is on the backs of the homeowners. We don't have a very large business base or industrial base. From what you've seen about what you know about Winchendon so far, can you identify any areas where you feel economic development is where we can go with that to improve it?
Well, again, Winchendon is not unusual from a lot of communities in Massachusetts outside the Boston area. I mean, it's the reliance on the residential property tax base is there. But I think places like Winchendon can take advantage of things that make it unique and positive. The example is you have a great deal of outdoor recreational facilities that you may be able to parlay into some type of niche that would allow for people to want to put a business there, for example, outdoor outfitting or things of that nature. You also have a significant number of underutilized mill space.
Beg pardon?
Underutilized mill space.
Mill space, yes.
And trying to reposition those properties to be areas for startup companies or for incubators is also something that you may want to look at. There's also things that you can do in terms of your land use planning to make sure your zoning is appropriate to do the type of economic development you want to have. And also you want to make sure that your regulatory and permitting process is more of an assistance to potential businesses as opposed to a hindrance, which is often the case in communities. But there's a lot of players in economic development in Massachusetts municipalities. You got your Board of Selectmen, you got your Conservation Commission, because inevitably you're around some wetlands. You got your Planning Board, you got your Zoning Board of Appeals. Most importantly, you have the public, who you need to make sure is receptive in terms of your economic development planning. So there's a great deal of facets to a strong economic development. Again, places like Winchendon it's difficult, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And that if you start working at it consistently and with clear objectives, I think you could bring about some strong economic development.
Well, I have heard from people saying that we are a very non-business friendly community at this point, and obviously, if we're going to be successful in bringing in new businesses, stuff like that, we need to address that.
Just as an aside, there's never been a community that I worked in where people have not said that, that they're not business friendly. So.
Our downtown, there's been a lot of talk about Central Street, the master plan. Was it only last year that we had Carousel Consulting through UMass? They did this wonderful research project and presented it to us. Any thoughts off the top of your head on how do you revitalize, how do you get back that village feel?
Yeah, well, I did read that report, and I do have to say I thought it was well written.
Nice.
A lot of times when you, UMass does, I think, a very good job, and this job was exceptional in terms of the approach that they took in terms of doing the streetscape improvements, widening the sidewalks, addressing one of the issues that clearly a management issue is lack of zoning enforcement in the downtown area. So using that as a template going forward is something I think the community would certainly be wise to do. I think also exploring the possibility of grant funds to do a lot of the work is something that you may want to do. Again, in North Andover, we were able to take a number of federal and state grants and do, again, that complete traffic restoration or renovation around our town commons with very little impact on the residential taxpayers. So I think that's a good template. I'd be curious as to how it's been played out to the public and whether it's been discussed with the business owners and property owners in the downtown area and whether they've bought into it as a vision and as a way they want to go forward, because obviously you need to have everybody on board moving in the right direction if you want to be successful.
Sure. All right, well, thank you.
Mr. Rees, thank you very much for being here. We spoke earlier about your management style, but I'm curious about your community leadership style. We spoke earlier also about regaining the trust of all aspects of the community. In your opinion, what's your vision of a manager within the town of Winchendon?
Well, I think the biggest role that a manager can do is bring about the professionalism that people want to know that their community is being well managed, that their hard-earned tax dollars are not being misused or squandered, that when they see their town manager, they see somebody who is capable of building that confidence that the government knows what they're doing and is going to do it well. I also see it as the town manager being the most important aspect of providing the customer service. That is so important, that when people's trash isn't being collected on time, or there's an issue with a street light going out, or an ambulance doesn't show up on time, I think the town manager has to take a leadership role and take responsibility for correcting those situations. So I think the focus, the vision, is on good professional management that makes people proud to be living in their community, and also a focus on highest level of service provisions to the community.
And going a little further than that, how do you find yourself dealing and working with the different stakeholders of a community, such as the selectmen, or the citizens, or even the business community, or even other departments, such as the school department?
Mm-hmm. I see my role as a facilitator and coordinator. I mentioned, again, during my times in North Andover, where when I got there, the school committee, I remember one day I was sitting at an 8 o'clock meeting, and I had the school chairman on one side and the Board of Selectmen chairman on the other side, and all of a sudden, this is 8 o'clock in the morning, they start throwing F-bombs at each other back and forth about the budget. And I said, oh my God, what have I got myself into? But what I was able to do over the time was, again, those people weren't going to get along at all. There were some personality issues, but I was able to be a bridge between the two of them and try to focus on what was best for the community, and not with somebody's personal agenda, why they liked or didn't like anybody. But that's a small example, but larger examples is that, again, I keep on going back to it because I think it was a pretty big success, was the renovation of the town common area. We had all sorts of stakeholders in that. We had the residents in the area. We had the historical commission. We had the conservation commission. The list goes on and on and on. And this was a multi-million-dollar project. We were also undergrounding utilities. And again, through communication, fact-based analysis, we were able to get everybody on the same page and move it forward. And it takes time, it takes effort. People are always going to be raising objections, and you need to be in a position to be able to respond to those objections and indicate how this project is going to play out in the long run, and also be willing to listen. Nobody's perfect, and nobody has all the answers. And I think by working with people in a positive, facilitative fashion, and listening to their ideas, sometimes people come up with better ideas than what you have on the table. And you have to be willing to be accepting of that as well.
Our district is fortunate to have some pretty good representation at the state level. You mentioned that you're comfortable with working with the DOR. What about with our representation, such as the state rep or state senator?
Well, I think I'm very comfortable with calling them up and trying to work with them to help advance the agenda for Winchendon and the region. In Portland, again, much larger community. I've worked with the state senators and the state representatives there on a number of items. I met with the governor on occasion. I was able to call the Department of Transportation director, the Environmental Protection Agency person, secretary on a regular phone call basis. Obviously, Winchendon probably doesn't have much clout as Portland did in Maine, but that doesn't mean that by building the positive relationships with your elected officials, you can't have a major influence in Boston. In North Andover, I mentioned we had the mayors and managers coalition, and we were able to, as a group, to go into Boston and to talk about matters of joint interest to us. And again, I think we had a major impact. Another example of that was intergovernmental cooperation was with, we had the Essex County Retirement System, which was a terrible regional system. The manager there was a terrible manager. He never showed up for work. There was very little transparency. Nobody knew what benefits they were going to get. I, working with other area managers, was able to go to the State House and bring about legislative changes that resulted in a completely different operation now that is far more efficient, far more effective, far more transparent. and we were able to bring about the legislation that was made those changes possible.
And also, similar question, how do you find yourself dealing and working with other communities?
I always tried to build very positive working relationships. Going back to my days in Ashburnham, Winchendon was a partner with a number of things. We put in a new water line. We did the water treatment plant, which back then was new. It's now, 25 years old, probably needs to be renovated. But
Wow.
Just talked about that last week.
Yeah.
So, I think, one of the things I think that, and Bernie can attest to this, is professional managers, local government managers in Massachusetts work very well together. And they look at ways that they can cooperate and help each other. And I've relied on my professional organization, the Mass Municipal Association, and the International City Managers Association for all sorts of assistance, both technical as well as supportive. It's not easy being a town manager, and it's nice to go to colleagues like Bernie and talk about some of the issues you're dealing with.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rees.
Thank you for coming, by the
No,
way.
My pleasure.
Are you wrapping up?
Thank you for having me.
Ask if anybody's ready for any questions.
That's me, jump the gun.
Yeah. No, I'm not wrapping up. We have some other questions that we'd like to ask.
Thank
Who's
you.
ready?
Mr. Rees, did I pronounce it correctly?
Rees, yeah.
Rees, okay, thank you. As Mike mentioned at the beginning, it's been a very interesting year, the past year. And there's been a lot of discussion by citizens, business people, et cetera, as to what type of town manager they would like to see, here in Winchendon. And one thing that's come very loud and clear to me is they want someone who's very hands-on, someone who, we talked about your open door policy and such like that, someone who perhaps takes time and, walks Central Street and stops in and says to the small businesses and the citizens and such like that. If you are hired, if you're offered and accept the position here in Winchendon, do you see yourself as that person who can reach out and make that one-on-one connection and be that hands-on? And how would you do it?
Yes, I do. I think one of the experiences that I had up in Portland, and leaving Portland gave me time to reflect on the jobs that I've had in the past that I got the most enjoyment out of. And I think I mentioned one of the big enjoyments I got is helping towns that have serious problems turn it around. But the other aspect of it is upon reflection, that I like working in smaller communities. I like that one-on-one interaction with the citizenry that wasn't possible up in a larger community like Portland. So if you look at my days in Ashburnham and Northbridge, my ability to get out and meet with the public on a regular basis was something I enjoyed a lot. It's more of an attitude than it is as a program. You want to be receptive to people. You want to have that willingness to go and talk with people. And that's, again, one of the things that I enjoyed in my career, and why one of the things that Winchendon is attracted to me is, again, I get that back into that smaller town flavor and being a person who people like to talk with me and get their feedback and things of that nature. But having said that, that doesn't take away the role of the selectmen in terms of being the elected policy leaders of the community.
Correct, yeah.
I'm not in competition with the Board of Selectmen in terms of interacting with the public and things of that nature. It's more of a sense of people feel comfortable with the professional government that they have in place.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions they'd like to pose? No. I have one more. Like any small town, like any town right now, one of the biggest challenges is, your schools versus towns, that type of mentality that's taken hold in a lot of communities. One thing we are fortunate, as a community, is we get about 70% of our funding through the state for the schools. But that does draw down on a small community what the balance is. Would you talk about that balancing act that you might have? You talked about North Andover, you talked about Ashburnham, so I'd like to hear your take on that type of, Portland obviously is a
whole different animal.
Whole different animal altogether. And I've had some dealings with people that were from Maine, so I understand their education system a little bit, of what's taking place up there. So give me your thoughts on that type of.
Well, one of the things, and sometimes this is taken as controversial, is that I think a well-supported school system is critical towards the future of any community, particularly even more so in a town like Winchendon. What makes a town attractive to young people moving into the community and staying in the community is the quality of the school system. And unless you have a top-notch school system, people are going to be looking elsewhere to educate their kids. That's just the reality of the situation. To those people who say that there's too many resources going to the school system, I point to a very clear data that shows that the quality of the school system is directly related to the property values that people have. So that if you're investing in your school system, you're investing in your own personal property values going up. And that's, again, sometimes controversial, but that's the fact. I've always striven to have a positive working relationship with the school superintendent, and through the school superintendent, the school committee. We've negotiated budgets. Sometimes those negotiations can be a little testy, but we've always been able to come about with a solution that was acceptable to everybody. One of the things that we've done, and that took some of the tension out of the budget setting process, was develop a formula as to how resources would be allocated between the municipal side and the school side. So it's very basic. You take your revenue estimates, you subtract your fixed costs from that, and what's left over is the pie that you need to split, and you come up with a percentage as to how that pie is going to be split based on those negotiations. And once you get that agreement, it makes future budget processes far more simple.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank you for coming. The next town manager that we appoint has a major task upon themselves to help us get through this thing. But it's also a unique opportunity. Winchendon, again, is a small community-based. I mean, you're familiar with Ashburnham. We have a unique. We're at the crossroads of 3 states almost. Mm-hmm. The potential for growth, whether it be business-wise, outdoor-wise, is just boundless. The next town manager we do put in place has the opportunity to put his legacy in place, and the legacy and set this town for many years to come. We look forward to hiring the next town manager. And I thank you for coming. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, I've been talking with Bernie off and on, so I know in terms of the financial program that you've been making very good progress in that area, and obviously it's something that I'd like to go forward. But I mentioned earlier the annual setting of goals is something that I've done in other communities in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen. Do you have a goal-setting process in place?
Not as of yet. We're working towards that. We're hoping to have that laid in with the new town manager. Okay. We've come into Bernie being the first person we really got to deal with. We've had an acting town manager since the election. So, and Mr. Lynch has done an outstanding job helping us get through this time. So we haven't set goals right now. Our first priority was to get our book straight. Which, again, him and his financial team, in conjunction with our staff, have set that path. Like anything, there's been bumps in the road. There'll continue to be bumps in the road, so we finish this process. But we haven't set any as of yet. We're waiting for the next town manager to come in to start to set those goals. We do have a town meeting coming up, which will kind of finish this budgetary cycle that we're going through this year. And then we'll work forward from there. So no, as of this point, our goals have been to get the ship righted, and we've been working effortlessly at that.
And obviously, your financial situation is of paramount importance to you now. But I'd be curious to hear what other challenges or concerns you have about the government in Winchendon that you see the new town manager addressing, outside the financial picture.
Well, what I'll do is I'll let each individual member speak, because it gives you a little more flavor than just me.
All right.
So I'm going to start on this side.
I really have two things. One, obviously, is to work on the trust with, you know, the whole community, but also to rebuild obviously the economic part. Again, if you go up and down Central Street, it's you know, quite depressing to go down. I see Winchendon has a lot of potential, and I can see a new town manager coming in and taking advantage of that, and really, you know, developing the town into a nice little town.
When Mike mentioned we're at the kind of the crossroads of 3 states, but we're also, I think, at a point in our history where we're at a crossroads between the small town, everybody knows everybody, if someone has a problem paying their taxes, come in and we'll work with you, to we need to be more efficient about what we do, you know, run more as a small business rather than, you know, the old-fashioned. Not that there's anything wrong with old-fashioned, but we're kind of at a crossroads there as well. And I see these next few years as a time when we're making those strides towards becoming more efficient. And, you know, the goal setting, the forecasting, I think all be very important parts to getting the government. And as you said, if things are running smooth up here, then everyone else can perceive that and have get that faith back.
Good, thank you.
For me, it still is the finances, and to know that we can have someone where we're not going to have any of these big surprises, and someone we can have confidence in, and someone who has the answers that can make our budget work, because it is what it is, but it doesn't seem to be working, and it has to. So we need someone who can make that work and hold people accountable for their departments, and you know, not looking for money constantly. That's an issue.
I think I would like to see the town grow as a whole unit, not just the town side or the school side. We all need to work together and be a much more exciting place and have a lot more growth and innovation in town. Make it something that people want to come into, see what's going on in Winchendon.
I look at this community as a unique opportunity. As we mentioned, we are at that crossroads of just hitting the 10,000 mark, where we need to grow in business, in residency. The current forecast we have is that we will be the oldest community within 5 years. So we have had no growth. We have a very high rate of vacant houses right now that need to be worked on and spun around. You know, building trust is with the community is one thing, but bringing the community back to life is very key, and trust helps that. That's the thing, you know, getting the community to buy in as a team all across the community, whether it's all the boards. That's key growing forward for this community. I think, you know, the challenges financial are going to be like any city and town are going to be there. We just happen to get caught on a bad curve. But, you know, we have worked out, we have laid the groundwork to fix that problem. It's a long-term success that we look forward to. Again, the potential of Winchendon is unlimited. We have great resources around us to use. We need to tap them. And the next town manager will need to be that person to be able to tap them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you. I think,
Thank you very much.
You know, based on your comments, I would certainly, I believe I certainly fulfill the qualifications and needs to help you take Winchendon on to the next level. Again, I think my financial management skills are certainly above par. My economic development skills have been proven a success in other communities that I've worked. My ability to work well with people and not be a divisive person is also well documented. So I think I bring the personality, I think I bring the experience, I think I bring the skills necessary to help you move Winchendon forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you, Mike.
At this time, I'd ask for a 5-minute recess so that we can go over what's taking place with our next candidate.
Okay, move for 5-minute recess.
Second?
Second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're at recess at 7:27. call the meeting of the Board of Selectmen back to order at 7:30. An announcement to the public, our third candidate, Mr. Sheehan, has got himself a job last night.
They're still working it out, but Mr. Sheehan called me today to withdraw. He felt it would be fair to both communities that he make a decision, and so he made that decision and wished us the best of luck. I've known Mr. Sheehan for many, many years. He had the misfortune of working for me in some of his career. I thought he would have been a very good fit here, but I think you have two outstanding candidates in Keith Hickey and Mark Rees. And but Mr. Sheehan did opt to withdraw.
Okay, so it's now up to the board how they want to proceed. Obviously, now we have just 2 candidates instead of 3. I kind of threw this out there if everybody's comfortable with that, or if they're not comfortable with that, So let's have this discussion to see what we want to, how you would like to proceed. We do have 2 outstanding candidates, but, everybody's opinion is valued, so. I'll start on this side.
So do we have the possibility of calling in another one?
Amy,
Well,
You gotta get to the microphone.
near the mic.
No, sorry, yeah.
the possibility of calling it. The screening committee,
is that realistic?
the screening committee felt that these were the 3 best candidates. And I would concur. And we could go back to the screening committee and ask for another if they want to send someone on. But it would be time consuming to do that. First off, and you've already lost 1 candidate during that period of time.
Could lose more.
That's a possibility. And that may be as a result of another job opportunity, or even a message of sorts that you were dissatisfied.
Could you say that again, please?
Sure, it could be a message that you were, it could be a job opportunity that came up for one of the other candidates, or it could be a message that they infer that you were dissatisfied with their interview or their background.
So that would be if we went back to the committee and requested
Right.
a third name?
Right.
Okay, thank you. I caught
I'm
the
sorry.
end, but not the beginning.
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
So I am satisfied. I'm all set. Yeah?
What's your feeling?
I'm very satisfied.
I'm satisfied.
I'm satisfied. I am a little concerned of the distance issue. That's why I pointedly asked both, will you be a hands-on manager? But overall, I'm very satisfied. One question for Bernie. I know there was an email to us yesterday suggesting a trial period, if you will. Number 1, your thoughts on that? Number 2, well, answer that first, and then I'll
Sure.
tell you number 2.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
You'd be asking someone to leave a job or leave an opportunity elsewhere for a very short-term expectation.
Right.
And the other point to keep in mind is that I know that there was, I saw that email as well, and I think there was a sense that if a manager might just come in and leave after a short period of time. Both of the interviewees that you've had, actually all 3 were, but are members of the International City Management Association. The code of ethics of the ICMA members is that when they make a commitment to a community, they must remain for at least 2 years. at which time then they're, if it isn't working out. Now, there can be extenuating circumstances, but generally and there are managers that are reprimanded by the association if they were to leave before that 2 years. So essentially, managers are making a commitment for those 2 years. And the standard of a manager's contract is generally 3 years. That's just for school superintendents and
Sure, okay.
others. Yeah.
All right,
And I could, personally, I can tell you that if I were going for a job back when I was going for jobs, I wouldn't go if it were
yeah.
for that type of arrangement.
And that was only for 6 months, which is what you
And
accepted.
and it's
Yeah, okay.
right.
I can see the pros and cons. You want a nice fit, and you hope you get it.
Yeah,
But-
and generally oftentimes what happens in a case like that is, over 9 months, I mean, we were asking the candidates tonight, we asked the screening committee did the same question of what your entry plan would be. The entry plan is generally, that's a 6-month process right there.
Yeah.
And then, before they're even up and running, and it just, like it or not, these are political environments.
Understood, yeah.
And after that period of time, you don't want the politics to enter into it.
Sure,
So
okay.
there needs to be I think both candidates pointed out, these are professional positions.
Right.
And it should be,
You're going to have an evaluation tool put in place anyway.
Well, that's where I was going to go. I know there is that tool in place. I've never seen it. I don't know about any of my other committee members. Is that something that when we reach the point of presenting a contract and negotiating, is that evaluation tool part of that, or is the candidate made aware of how we would be evaluating them, or does that come at a later point?
it can be put in. The tool itself could be, it could be included, it could be developed over time. Managers will want to have, I think both of the candidates told you about the evaluation tools they use for their direct reports.
Right, that's where I was going, yeah.
And as a manager, you want to hear from the board how you're doing. And it's discouraging when that doesn't happen. And so, I mean, you go into it with a certain amount of dread,
Sure.
as we all do, right? But you want to hear, how am I doing? Where areas should I improve on? Because they're interested in succeeding because of their professional commitments and obligations. There's also monetary rewards oftentimes that accompany those. If someone's doing a particularly good job, they'll be rewarded. And there's job security that comes with it. If they're doing a good job, then there'll be a new contract, or they'll be able to retain those jobs. So they want to hear that. But the contract that is developed that would be offered to a candidate should certainly include reference to an annual evaluation. So if you were to hire someone now, you'd probably be looking at next December doing an evaluation of that individual to determine how they're doing. And I think I think both candidates spoke to this, the notion of goal setting. So you set goals, and they hold their people accountable by the objectives that are put in place to have those goals be achieved. And then you measure, he will measure his people by how they're doing. You will measure him by how he and his people are doing. And then there'll be the subjective part, as I think Mr. Rees mentioned it here. Well, how are they doing on communication? Is that an issue?
Right.
And I would warn the board, because I can, that communication is something that is a very serious part of the manager's job, but it should not be used as sort of a catch-all, like, oh, you're just not communicating enough. I've seen that happen in communities. It's often, we don't know what we don't like, so we'll just say there's not enough communication. Or there's things happening, I get stopped on the street and I don't know the answer, so it's got to be the manager not communicating. But there are legitimate issues that the manager should stay in touch with the board, and the manager should be communicating. So you want to evaluate, how are you doing? How can we improve that? A number of other subjective criteria that you may want to
Okay.
raise in that as well. But, and there are different tools out there that can be used, and they work successfully.
Just from past experience, the state just really put in the school committee's toolbox, the evaluation tool that they came up with. It's kind of a two-part system. You do a goal setting, then you kind of get like halfway through the year and you kind of see where you're at.
Yeah, I want some sort of checkup at some
Yeah,
point.
and then at the end of the year, you've got that final set of
Okay.
goals. So, I mean, we can reach out and set, obviously, it would be a concern to me that we do include that I'm
Yeah.
Contract?
in the contract that
Yeah.
a evaluation tool is put in place.
So our- so they
You
know.
know, we could get a sample one and
I don't,
kind of
yeah, I don't
look
know if
at 'em.
that's necessary.
Yeah,
but
and then,
just-
you agree on a set of principles of how you're gonna go about it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair that you don't work collaboratively with the town manager to build the evaluation tool. I think, it has to be a joint effort, because obviously, the person we're going to hire is coming in here to work with us and understands the parameters that we're
Right.
working under. So that, we can negotiate that in as we go. How to build that, I don't think I have the answer right now, but that's,
yeah, I
there
just
is a way
wanted it
to
out
do
there,
it.
yeah.
It's just a matter of how everybody wants to go about it. So that's part and parcel. There's always I wouldn't believe that there wouldn't be an evaluation.
Oh, I knew there would be,
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it should be, at the negotiating table.
And the other part,
So-
with regards to the hands-on nature of the manager, and that's something too that can be addressed in sort of the subjective part of it, or go within the goals. That
Okay, yeah.
how do you one of the issues that may be raised is how do you one of our goals is to have an administration that's involved in the community, and I'm not sure how I would phrase it
Sure,
exactly.
yeah, I know what you're trying to-
But the board can set that as a goal, and then the manager can come back with ideas of how that would happen.
Okay.
I had a board one time that wanted actually me to become more, do more outside of the community and more in the region as a request. So, I came forward with a set of proposals to make that happen, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is to make a motion to accept the two candidates we have.
I move to accept do I have to name them?
Yeah.
No.
The two candidates that we interviewed as finalists for the position of town manager.
Can I get a second on that?
Seconded.
All that in favor, say aye.
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 And I vote aye also. Before we break, I think we're there. It has come up that there is a candidate for a empty school committee seat. They are looking to meet on the 19th. We would like to do that at 7 o'clock. It should take no longer than 20 minutes, 25 minutes tops. In doing that, we'd like to, it's come to our attention that on Monday, when we do our agenda, we have the town warrant. Instead of having the meeting on the 16th to vote on it, I know Mr. Lynch has a commitment. We'd like to vote on the warrant to accept it. We'll have it on our packet this weekend, and then we'd like to vote on the actual articles that night, giving us the 16th off.
So we do it on the 19th, is that what you
No,
said?
we're doing it on Monday.
Oh,
You'll have
Monday.
all the warrant information in your packet Friday. So you'll get
Okay.
to review it. We'll close the warrant, accept the warrant, then we'll
Okay.
vote on the actual
We'll
articles.
make our votes all that same,
All
yeah.
on the same
I'm fine with that.
night. It kind of expedites the process. And then that'll allows us to have that 16th off, and then meet with the school committee on the 19th. Because they also have articles, so maybe we could touch base on
I
their
was
articles.
going to say, don't all three boards get together to review those articles?
I don't think we're meeting before town meeting. I think the school committee's got some articles coming forward so we can talk to them about them at that time. The Finance Committee will hold their hearing anyway,
When's their hearing?
17th.
17th,
Okay.
all right? And then we'll be full speed ahead.
If I could, just on the warrant articles, I think most of them you're all familiar with. There's I've talked about them at a couple of meetings now. There's a couple new ones in there regarding a donation of land. There's an issue with the fire station roof with some money that is needed to finish the job. Apparently there was $80,000 set aside back in 2012, I think, or 2013. But before, and that was based on a cost estimate to do the roof. And then I even think before the vote was taken at town meeting, it was determined that a new generator was needed. But so a decision was made, and I believe town meeting was involved with this, but one way or another, the decision was made to pay for the generator out of that $80,000 that was the budgetary number for the roof. So now here we are today, particularly became aware of it last week when we had all that rain. The roof leaks, and seriously, and we need to get that done, but there's only $55,000 there now, so we want to add, the estimate we have now is around $75,000, so we're adding $20,000 to that. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of options we have on that other than stabilization, so that's the source of funding for that. The good news in terms of the reserves is that special legislation does require that the town, it's going to be a handcuff on the town of sorts, does require the town set aside money in a separate reserve fund for 10 years. So $78,000 this year, it jumps up to $140,000 next year. So we've got a $1.2 million stabilization fund right now. We have a $900,000 infrastructure fund, and now we're going to set up this special reserve fund. The reserves are going to be growing. So to use that $130,000 for the health insurance and to use the $20,000 this year for the fire department roof, I think it gets us over that hump and allows for the capital planning that we've been talking about, allows for the forecasting that is essential to ensure that that money isn't touched moving forward. I mean, you want good, healthy reserves. It's there's always a question of, well, when's healthy enough? But I think that we need to get those projects done. There's the budget changes, and I'll have a spreadsheet that will be sent out to you this week as well, attached to my report, that outlines where the budget was, where the budget is, and then the changes in dollar amounts. And what it will look like, I'll just warn you now, it's going to look like we had a balanced budget, or close to a balanced budget, in the spring, which we did in terms of projections that were made and expenses. But certain revenue sources, the Department of Revenue has said, you can't use those. And we've also identified some additional revenues that we can put in, but there's also been some budgetary changes that we've realized, like the fact that there is no grant money for the planning department, like the fact that certain salaries were included, like the fact that there was nothing set aside for snow and ice deficit. Once you start adding all those up, you start running the town into a deficit. So we've made some budget reductions as well. And again, we come up with a budget that's balanced, and the Department of Revenue has signed off on all of the revenue estimates and the expenditure needs that we have. So that's the big warrant article. There's some bond rescissions, there are bond authorizations to go back to, and I'm saying this, and I'll have to repeat it all Monday night, but there's some bonds that were authorized back in 1997 all the way through 2012 that have never been borrowed. So they're sitting on the books. It's like a line of credit we have that we're never going to use, but as we all know with our personal credit rating, if we have all that authorized debt out there, it works against us. So we'll rescind those, and that will look good to the bond rating agencies. And I'll have some more information on the bond ratings, but I'll save that for Monday night. Otherwise, we won't need to meet Monday night either, so.
Anyway, I'd like to thank the board for the last 2 nights. You've done a really good job interviewing people. I think we have a couple of days to think about it. So go over your notes. I'm actually taping tonight, so, at home, so I have tonight's. I missed last night, so I just need last night's to go over. But other than that, I'd like to say thank you to the candidates that showed up. Thank you again to the screening committee that did make this possible for us. They brought us some outstanding candidates. So with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, please,
Yes.
I'd just like to, I have not seen the warrant. I don't know what articles are on there other than the ones that you've made me aware of. I would ask that if anyone has put an article on the warrant, please be present Monday evening to answer any questions that we may have on it, or to present your case. It would be very beneficial for us, if there's a school article or what have you, to have someone here to speak to it.
We'll make sure that school department's made aware. I think we may have already done that, but if not, we will. And the only other one that's on there, I believe, is the fire department, and the planning director will be here as well.
All right, thank you.
Other than that, it's just me.
All right, thank you. Move to adjourn.
I need a second.
Seconded?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
7:50.